It was a dark and stormy night when Sarah and her husband, Tom, decided to move into their new house. It was an old Victorian-style mansion that had been on the market for years, and they were thrilled to finally be able to call it their own. As they began to unpack their belongings, Sarah noticed something strange about one of the walls in the living room. It was slightly off-center, and when she pushed on it, it gave way, revealing a small door that she hadn't noticed before. Tom was hesitant to investigate, but Sarah's curiosity got the best of her, and she grabbed a flashlight before crawling through the small door. What she found on the other side was something out of a nightmare. The room was dark, and the air was thick with dust and the smell of decay. The walls were lined with shelves, each one filled with jars of various shapes and sizes, some of them containing unrecognizable objects that seemed to be floating in a murky liquid. In the center of the room was a large table, covered with a stained cloth that had once been white. On the table were various instruments, including knives, saws, and other implements that Sarah couldn't identify. As she continued to explore the room, she noticed a faint scratching sound coming from one of the walls. She approached cautiously, shining her flashlight on the source of the noise, and saw that there was a small hole in the wall. She peered through the hole and saw a pair of glowing eyes staring back at her. Suddenly, the creature on the other side of the wall began to scratch frantically, trying to break through to the other side. Sarah screamed and ran back to the door, but she found that it was now locked from the outside. She pounded on the door, screaming for Tom, but he was nowhere to be found. As the scratching grew louder, Sarah realized that she was not alone in the room. The shelves began to shake, and the jars on them rattled, threatening to spill their contents onto the floor. Just as Sarah was about to give up hope, the door suddenly creaked open, and Tom appeared, looking just as terrified as she was. Together, they fled the room, slamming the door behind them and vowing never to return. As they made their way back to the living room, they could still hear the scratching coming from the secret room. And as they settled in for the night, they both knew that they would never be able to forget the horrors they had witnessed in that terrible place. After their terrifying encounter with the secret room in their new house, Sarah and Tom decided to call the police and report the disturbing discovery. The police investigated the room thoroughly, but found no evidence of foul play or criminal activity. However, they did discover that the room had been used by the previous owner, a notorious serial killer who had been operating in the area for years. The shelves lined with jars of murky liquid were filled with human remains, and the instruments on the table were used to mutilate and torture the killer's victims. Sarah and Tom were understandably traumatized by the discovery, but they were relieved to know that the killer had been caught and brought to justice. They decided to stay in the house and slowly began to make it their own, but they never ventured near the secret room again. However, strange things began to happen in the house, and Sarah and Tom couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Doors would slam shut on their own, objects would move inexplicably, and they could hear strange noises in the middle of the night. One night, Sarah woke up to find a shadowy figure standing at the foot of their bed. It was the same creature with glowing eyes that she had seen in the secret room. The creature vanished before her eyes, leaving Sarah terrified and shaken. From that night on, Sarah and Tom began to experience even more paranormal activity in their home. They eventually decided to move out, unable to bear the constant terror and fear of what lay hidden in the secret room. The house was eventually sold to another family, and Sarah and Tom never spoke of their experience again. But they knew that they would never be able to forget the horrors that had been lurking behind that small door, waiting to be uncovered by unsuspecting homeowners.
If you like this content, why not think about subscribing to the channel so you don't miss out on any more scary stories. Thanks. As time went on, the curiosity I had about the locked door in my house turned into an obsession. I found myself staring at it for hours on end, trying to decipher what could be hiding behind it. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that something sinister was lurking behind that door. It started with strange noises, coming from the other side of the door. I would hear scratching and tapping, and what sounded like whispers. I tried to brush it off as my imagination, but the noises only grew louder and more persistent as time went on. Then, one night, I had a dream. In the dream, I was standing in front of the locked door, and I could feel something on the other side, pushing against it with all its might. I woke up in a cold sweat, convinced that something was trying to break through. But the real terror came when I started to see things. Out of the corner of my eye, I would catch glimpses of shadows moving, and shapes twisting in impossible ways. I felt like I was losing my mind. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard a sound that chilled me to the bone. It was a soft, feminine voice, whispering something in a language I didn't understand. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew, deep down, that they were meant for me. I tried to ignore it, to pretend like everything was normal, but the fear wouldn't leave me. I became convinced that whatever was behind that door was evil, and that it was only a matter of time before it found a way to get out. It wasn't until I mustered up the courage to confront the locked door that I realized the truth. There was nothing behind it. No demons, no ghosts, no evil entities. Just an empty room, with nothing but dust and cobwebs. But even as I stood there, staring at the empty room, I could still feel a sense of unease. It was as if the door itself had been imbued with some dark, malevolent energy, and that it had seeped into my mind, leaving me scarred and afraid. To this day, I can't help but wonder what would have happened if I had not managed to open that door. But one thing is for sure, I'll never be able to shake the feeling of dread that came over me every time I thought about it.